joined Openpay, which became the third largest buy now, pay later in Australia.
Wow.
As their fifth employee, essentially came together with a go-to-market strategy.
That is incredible.
Executed on that. Took that business from 5 employees to 250 employees in 2.5 years.
Wow.
Obviously involved with some very influential business figures, which allowed me to learn a lot through that process. IPO'd the business on the Australian Stock Exchange after 2 years.
Wow.
Launched into the UK, into the US. I mean, we can keep talking about all that, but it was a phenomenal ride. It was one of those things where, you just don't get that experience anyway.
Wow. How important is sales in business?
Without sales, your business is dead, right? That's the number one most important thing. And so I think one skill you need to have as a business owner is sales. And if you don't have it, bring someone who's bloody good at it.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm raising money in 2 years. Why not start building relationship with investors now?
Dude.
Without any relevance to a business or an idea that I've got. Let's just build a relationship.
Yeah.
So when the time is right, they've already got a relationship and they want to back me because they like me before even any product I have.
Wow. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, James. I appreciate you having me, and I've had the pleasure to sort of share an office with you in the past, which has been great to see your journey as you progress in business.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. So I wanted to kick off today's conversation, as I always like to do, just around purpose and why. I think anyone running a business, it's so hard. There's so many different challenges. What makes you go after business and take on these massive pursuits? What's your drive?
Sure. Good question. I think from a young age, I've always been very competitive. And it's just one of those things where I fell into business out of finding a gap or a need or a problem in the market and then sort of tackling that problem. And as I've grown and have had kids and have sort of seen world problems, my why has somewhat changed and has, I guess, has always sort of, delve deeper into what is my why, my purpose and what am I really trying to achieve? And so for now, obviously, while I've got kids, it's all about how do I provide a better future for my kids? So as an example, baresop, as you know, is a sustainability project I'm involved in. I think, having my kids grown up, I very much see that process transitioning from a non-sustainability global agenda to a more sustainable one where our kids and their kids and generations ahead will have a world that they're able to live in, right? Which I think is important, which is an opportunity that we've had. And that's sort of my purpose is okay, well, I've got kids now, they come first before me. And how can I give back to the world at a larger scale?
I love that. I love the holistic view of that I'm not just making another sale or building another product or whatever it is. It's the impact I'm going to have on the future and the world.
For sure. Yeah. Super important.
Yeah. How about for yourself? What's been your story in business? How did you get started? Where are you today? Just to provide some context, let's hear the Michael story.
Yeah, sure. So having grown up in Israel, I moved here when I was 13.
Yeah.
One thing not many people know about me, I was actually a judo champion in Israel.
Yeah, wow.
So I started when I was 4 and became Israel champion when I was 11, which is pretty cool.
So you can 13. Throw me across the room.
Yeah, I can try. You won't like that very much, but it's been a while since I've gone into it. So I've always had sort of that competitive spirit in me from a young age. And so I used to hate losing. It was one thing I used to hate. So much so I used to cry when I lost.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those things that just was in my DNA from early on. After that, obviously, I moved to Australia and I was sort of trying to figure out what I'm looking to do. Growing up in a Jewish family, you either become a heart surgeon or a surgeon or a doctor or a lawyer, as you know. And so I tried to sort of take the surgery path and thought I wanted to be a heart surgeon. And so when I finished high school, I did quite well in high school. Didn't quite get the marks to get into medicine. And so I went into a nursing and paramedicine degree, a double degree, thinking I'll work my way up. And so while I was doing that, I was working at Telstra doing enterprise and government sales 3 days a week in the city. And I was basically receiving better results than anyone in the country that are full-time at Telstra, literally nationally, and doing 3 days a week. And so I'm okay, well, I must be good at sort of selling or building relationships and so forth and so on. And that's when I was working at Telstra, every time on my lunch break, when I wanted to get a haircut, there were 2 options at the time. It was in Melbourne City. One option, you either call up a hairdresser and you hope that within the half an hour break that you have, you can actually get an appointment. Or you walk downstairs and hope that you find the right hairdresser and hope that you get in half an hour and get back into the office. Very fragmented, as you can appreciate. Yeah. So what we decided to do is take the ownership and narrative and create a product that allows you to book on the go via technology, via an app, by geolocation based on where you are.
Wow.
And so I did that with two other guys at Telstra. They were both in sort of like mid to late 30s. I was very early, sort of 18, 19-year-old. Build a decent database and then sort of somewhat was forced to sell the company when I was about 23 to Zomato, which is a $1 billion business out of India. So that was great to experience of going from 0 to 1 and building something that someone actually wants, then selling that business as much as we didn't sell it at what it should have been sold at. But I guess it was a living and learning experience when 2 years later, two girls from Bondi sold the same business for 200 million. So you kick yourself, but you learn.
Yeah. Right? Wow, man. So you just had like that whole entrepreneurial journey, like in a couple of years, right at the start of your career.
Well, it was just one of those things where I've always started working young. So like my first job was, you know, whatever the legal age is, 14 and 9 months. Sure. I went into and worked at Optus, you know, doing sales while I was doing school. Then I went and did a double degree whilst I was still working. So I was always doing like a 7-day a week thing, right? Where, you know, work was in my DNA, right?
Do you feel like you get that from family, that work ethic, or is it you, or?
Yeah, well, one of my, I guess, things is over in Israel, my parents were both military, right? So having very strong work ethic, you know, also working 7 days a week. It's just one of those things I grew up with. And I don't know whether I modeled that, but it came to my nature of, hey, let's work, save, invest. I bought a couple of investment properties pretty young age as well, which was good and helped, you know, down the track, which I liquidated last year. But I guess, I think it sort of comes from that. And just always understanding like opportunities, being able to communicate and network very well from a very young age. And it's not something that I intentionally went out to do. It was something that just naturally sort of came to me, realizing sort of what I'm good at, you know?
Yeah, no, I love it. You're very, very enterprising kind of a personality.
Yeah.
I cut off your story. So you had that whole experience where you kind of forced to sell the business, doesn't really sell at the level you want.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So then obviously I had the medical background behind me. So I finished my degree because anything I do, I sort of tend to finish. Finish that while selling my business, while working at Telstra. And then after that, I did a short stint. I had a few friends in medical sales. So they were doing pharmaceutical sales. They were on the road, company cars, you know, company credit cards, getting $150,000 a year plus for quite young guys. I'm like, this is interesting. So I started looking into it. Very difficult industry to get into, by the way. Got into a company called Clifford Hallam Healthcare, which is Australia's largest medical distribution company, 70,000 products, 750 suppliers they work with.
Wow.
And then basically what I did was I started selling for them into hospitals, aged care facilities and GP clinics. And so that's when I started combining my medical knowledge with sales because I thought, okay, there could be a strong alignment there. Did extremely well for about a year. Did the largest deal for the company, which is STL Healthcare, which was one of the largest aged care facilities in Australia. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I'm doing really well. I'm making good money here. I'm working 4-hour days. I'm way too comfortable. I've got a company car, company credit card. I'm 23 years old. Like, this is just way too good, too young. And I became too comfortable. And so I'm like, okay, I've got to get out of this comfort zone. What's next? And that's when I started sort of looking at what can I do next? So because I had the medical background, I thought, why don't I start a medical distribution company? Because I don't know if you know, but Israel's sort of 15 years ahead when it comes to medical technology.
Right, okay.
And so I approached a contact out of Israel who was moved to Australia to commercialize a product. And essentially I reached out to him to see if he had a network or a contact for me in Israel to bring medical devices. So we caught up over lunch. And this guy, mind you, was the CEO of a company that had about 50,000 employees globally out of Israel. Very well-known company.
Wow, okay.
And he was a shark, right? And I'm having over lunch with him saying, do you have any contacts for me? And he goes, look, unfortunately I don't, because my background's cybersecurity. However, very high net worth Jewish family out of Melbourne brought me to Australia to commercialize this reverse lay-by thing. And so we got talking, and he was telling me that one of the daughters from the high net worth families saw how reverse lay-by in Israel has been done for the past 15 years, where you can walk into a shop, and traditionally in Australia, you walk into a shop, you want to pay over payments, and then you walk away and you don't get the product until you paid off the full amount. Whereas in Israel, for the past 15 years, you're able to go to a furniture store, for example, buy your furniture for the house, pay it over time, but walk away with the goods straight away.
Yeah, okay.
So they had a massive retail chain in Australia, and they're like, why don't we bring it to Australia, test it in our retail chain and see what happens? And he was brought here to really push the narrative and the agenda. And so he said to me, what do you think is the opportunity for us in the market? And I said, look, I'm not interested, keen to start my medical distribution company. And it was one of those elements where, because I respected him and who he was, he said, why don't you present to us and the board what you think the opportunity for us is in the market?
Yeah.
And so 3 days later, I put together a presentation, walked into 120 Collins Street, into this family office in a suit.
Yeah.
23, 24-year-old, having like sort of not a shitload of experience yet.
Yeah.
Walked in, presented what I saw the opportunity was, and literally we had a deal on the table that day. Didn't let me walk out of the sort of boardroom till we had that deal.
Wow.
And so I joined Openpay, which became the third largest buy now pay later in Australia.
Wow.
As their fifth employee, essentially came together with a go-to-market strategy.
That is incredible.
Executed on that. Took that business from 5 employees to 250 employees in 2.5 years.
Wow.
Obviously involved with some very influential business figures, which allowed me to learn a lot through that process. IPO'd the business on the Australian Stock Exchange after 2 years.
Wow.
Launched into the UK, into the US.
That's
we
incredible.
can keep talking about all that, but it was a phenomenal ride. It was one of those things where you just don't get that experience anyway.
Wow. How much did experience change your life?
Oh, completely. Imagine being able to do what you want, how you want, with the top business figures to get their advice in the same room every single day, right? And being able to execute with almost unlimited funds. Unbelievable. And obviously the fact that I guess we rode a wave, like the tide was with us, not against us. Afterpay became a $39 billion business. So it helped. It helped, obviously, that the industry was going in the right direction. And that journey was phenomenal.
Yeah, wow. And so what happens next in the narrative? So you had this amazing experience, huge success, up to 200 employees, was it?
250. Yeah, in 2 years. It was just like employing 10 people every week. It's just out of control.
Wow.
I guess after that, so whilst I was at Openpay, I was approached by every competitor you can think of in the market.
Yeah.
But because I'm very ethical and I had a good relationship with the chairman and CEO who brought me in, obviously I wasn't going to go to a competitor. And so again, I was looking for what's my next thing. And so me and another guy who had pharmaceutical sales experience built an algorithm that allows you to detect outliers in GP clinic prescriptions. So if you think about, let's say you go to a GP clinic, they prescribe you a drug. You go to the pharmacy, you get the drug, right? In hospital, the process is somewhat different. You're in a hospital, they prescribe a drug, you get it on the spot, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these doctors work 12-hour days, 7 days a week, super tired.
Yeah.
So the number of errors they make is substantial.
Right.
And the cost from medication errors are substantial. So not only sometimes they prescribe the wrong drug, but they prescribe too much of that drug. So we create an algorithm that will plug into the hospital system to figure that out.
Wow.
And so what happened was we got a small round of funding through family friends. I left Openpay. We had a trial with Epworth Hospital, which is one of the leading private hospitals.
Yeah, wow.
And then COVID happened.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, shit, I've just left everything and this is what I'm doing. And the world's gone to shit.
Yeah.
So hospitals have obviously just prioritized PPE. We put that on hold. Literally ended up just sort of like, because we didn't know what's going on with that, I sort of looked at other opportunities.
Yeah.
And again, I had a contact who approached me to help him fill a gap from a very large medical distribution company in the device space, so selling to orthopedic surgeons. So I joined that business. Again, unbelievable pay, very flexible, looking after Epworth and some of the Australia's largest hospitals, selling to orthopedic surgeons. So I did that for about a year. And then again, looked for what's next, right? And so for me, what was next is I got accepted into Antler, which you probably know is a large global VC accelerator program.
Yep.
And as you know, they get probably 10,000 applicants a year and about 30 get accepted every month. So again, very difficult organization to get into. Got into that to commercialize a VR project in the education sector. 2 companies out of 30 got funded.
Wow.
We weren't one of those companies.
Right.
And I was sharing an office with Priska, who founded baresop.
Yeah.
And while I was at Antler, so probably about 18 months before that, while I was, sort of off from Openpay, I was looking at sustainability products for my own household. And I bought pretty much all the products.
Yeah.
And one of them was baresop, and I thought it was the best product in the market.
Yeah.
So I reached out to Priska probably about 18 months ago. Hey, just a side note, love your product, love what you're doing, the mission you're after. We should have a chat. She came back to me. I parked the conversation. I didn't even get back to her. 18 months later, when I'm at Antler, I've got this thing where I recognize faces very well. So I could see your face today for a second, and I could see in London in 15 years, and I'll know I saw you here.
Yeah.
Just bizarre. Long story short, I remember that she messaged me 18 months ago, and I said, why don't we catch up? So messaged her back, caught up with her in the office. She told me that she essentially took baresop out of an accelerator called StartMate. So she got accepted into StartMate, which is one of Australia's largest accelerator, got funded through that channel, which gets funded through Blackbird Ventures. 18 months later, fast forward 18 months later, when we're having this conversation, she goes, look, because I've got background in product, I'm not commercial, and I need someone commercial to help me because this is what we're doing, but we're not moving at the speed that we should be moving. One thing led to another. I ended up acquiring half the company, came on as a chief commercial officer and a major shareholder of that business. And now the business is about to be valued at around $15 million.
Wow.
Sort of 15 months later, right? So it's like, that's an interesting play. I also do advisory and consultancy work to a lot of, startup founders, which has been great. And I've been able to sort of take equity in those businesses. And I've also created a fund that actually buys established businesses that are already under management, that doesn't require my time, but already trading and is profitable.
Wow.
So I've got my hands pretty full, as you could appreciate.
Mate, I love your story. Like, I think there's so much to unpack in that, but I think this common trait that's all the way through is just this ability to like seize and capitalize on opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, because I suppose there'd be times throughout that whole journey, be like, holy shit, like what am I supposed to do next? But you just keep on.
Always.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
I really want to get into some of the practical stuff about you guys, but before I do that, I just wanted to ask, what's been like a really big setback for you or a challenge throughout this journey? Is there anything you can share on that front?
Yeah, I think, for a period of time where you go and you don't make money, I think a lot of founders, are scared to take the leap because they're like, okay, I'm not going to be funded. I'm not going to have money. What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. I think when your back is against the wall, it's when you perform even better, right? And when you go even harder and when you put the foot on the pedal, right? So I think that's a really big sort of foundational element that goes, okay, shit, you need to do stuff. But in terms of like, from a setback, I think that's one of them. In terms of another setback, I mean, I've always sort of been very diligent with the way I do deals. Like during baresop, for example, we had an instant we had an opportunity to do a deal in Asia, and about to do the deal, about to sign on the bottom line, did a heavy DD, found out that this company trading out of Israel, selling into Hong Kong and India, so forth and so on, who sell themselves as an unbelievable player, distributor, having a warehouse the size of this through, right?
Well,
claiming to do millions of dollars for brands, right? Wow. So then did a deep dive into DD, spoke to a few brands, worked out that we would have lost about $500,000 doing that deal. So like when you talk about setbacks, I think I'm very cautious of who I do deals and when I do deals to sort of get that out of the line. Obviously selling my business poorly compared to where it should have been sold was a massive setback and sort of something I kick myself every day, but it's a learning curve. But I guess on the flip side of that, the biggest learning experience is probably Openpay, which has been able to catapult my growth, outside of Openpay, but also be able to just align myself with the right network,
Yeah, totally makes sense. So you've achieved some incredible things. First question I have is just around mindset, like on an individual level of who you are. If someone's wanting to get to $1 million or take it further than that, what kind of mindset do they need? What kind of energy do they need to bring to it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's important. Like I've always had hunger in me and I continue to do so. And I hope that lasts for a very long time. And I think that helps. There's a saying, Israeli mentality, you have chutzpah, which means it's like you're aggressive, right? And I think that helps in Australian market. So from a mindset perspective, it's one of those things where number one, never give up, right? So always know that you're going to fail and learn from your failures. I think that's important. Whether you fail or not, it doesn't really matter, right? As long as you take it as a learning and you continue to move forward, have that mindset of going, okay, I might not necessarily succeed the first time round, but I am going to continue to try until I succeed at all costs. So having that mindset. The other element is don't pretend or think that you know everything when you don't. I think that's probably one of the most dangerous things in business. It's like what you don't know, great, fantastic, recognize you don't know it, and bring the best people to the table with that advice or people who have lived that experience to give you the advice so that you don't make the mistakes, spending money and time that they have, right? So going in with a very open mindset to go, I don't know everything, but I will get to know as much as possible and have a handle on things through bringing the right people to the table. And then I guess third and lastly is just one of those things where just know that it's not going to be easy. Like a lot of people think it might be easy, and like you probably know the startup turbulence every day. You could have the most incredible morning at 9 o'clock, but then at 10:30 it becomes the most unbelievable day and worst day you've had in your life and you want to basically jump off a bridge. But ultimately, if you know how to ride those waves and you get have come across hard times, then you'll be okay to get that through, So always look at hard times, lead you to better times, right? And so having that mindset, I think, is very important.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to hear because I really do think we don't always share the challenges that we go through, and it sort of gives this perception that everything's easy and I'm just, going through life and blah, 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 but everybody faces shit. Like everybody's dealing with stuff.
Correct. And like you're always things are going to come across your day that you don't sort of expect. And I think you just need to be very focused and know how to sort of deflect what you don't need to bring in. That's been one of the biggest learnings for me is just that, I suppose, that inner strength of being like, I'm going to deal with all these problems and I'm going to get through it. Where right at the start, like year one, any problem that came up, I was like, totally done. Like I'd be out for a couple of days. I'd be like emotional about it. I'd be in my head about it. I don't want to talk to anyone. And then as I've gotten better and better, it's like this strength to be like, okay, cool. I'm probably going to get like 20, 30 problems all at the same time. And I'm going to just deal with it. I love that. And because at the end of the day, nothing's pressing enough to like break you down, right? And I think one element that I've learned, which I could share with your audience and with you, is like, focus a lot of your energy and time, sort of 90% of your time, on things that are going wrong in the business, right? Rather than the other way around. A lot of people, what they do is they go, oh, we've done this amount of sales this month. This has worked. Let's double down on what's working. Hold on a minute. Yes, do that. but what's actually not working, what's doing really badly, how do we cover that off to ensure that we turn that around? And that's one advice I got from a very influential business figure. Implemented that across Openpay and it worked phenomenally, right? So like I've lived by that and just try and continue to use that.
So it's even if things are going great, let's look at where can we improve, where we need to level up.
Where are the gaps, you know, where's like focus your attention and energy on what's going wrong in the business, which is interesting.
Love it. Love it. How important is sales in business?
Oh, like without sales, your business is dead, right? Like that's the number one most important thing. And so I think one skill you need to have as a business owner is sales. And if you don't have it, bring someone who's bloody good at it. Because ultimately that's what's going to pay the bills and keep your head count. I used to have this thing where, you know, before I do a large deal at Openpay, for example, like a Booper deal, right? I would literally sit above my development team's head going, well, if we don't achieve this tomorrow, you may not have a job tomorrow, right? Because that's what's going to bring you $60 million over the next 3 years to pay your jobs and your headcount jobs, right? And so sales is like a must and you always need to be selling. I think you've got to be very careful now more so than ever that you don't just sell for the sake of selling, but you also sell in a very profitable way. And so I've seen way too many times, and I'm a victim of this, is where I just want to do the deal because it looks great. But does it impact our bottom line in a positive way, in a negative way? Because if it's in a positive way, great. If it's in a negative way, is it really worth doing the deal, you know, and justifying why you're doing that deal? So I say sales is everything.
Love it. It makes so much sense. I don't really relate when people are like, oh, I don't want to be salesy or I don't want to learn sales. I'm like, dude, if you're in business, like, it's a pretty key skill. What do you think makes a great salesperson or what can people focus on to improve?
I think before you focus on like the sales element is like focus on building relationships that are actually meaningful and you know, yes, transactional relationships are great, but before transactional relationships, like how do you go above and beyond for your relationships, right? So that one day when something's required, you've got that covered. And so before you go and sell someone, why should someone trust you to buy that product? And so firstly, build relationships. Secondly, sell a feeling, not a product, you know? And so when you look at the likes of some of the world's most successful companies like Apple, Nike, and so forth, you know, they don't sell you a shoe or a phone. They sell you a feeling of status or how you're going to look at school when you're walking in with those Nike runners, right? And the friendship groups that you'll be accepted into. Or with an iPhone, you know, they sell you simplicity. Like you're using a smartphone that's probably for the stupidest people. And I'm one of those people.
Me too, man.
You know, but like it's simple, right? My kid who's a 2-year-old uses an iPhone because he can and he knows how to. So, you know, sell people a feeling and build those relationships that are meaningful to be able to then sell, right? Because it's not a hard sell then. It becomes one of those things where you're helping them. And again, third element to that is like what problems and pain points are you solving for your prospect? And so understand your prospect problems better than they do to even show. Sometimes you have to show them that they've got a problem and give them a solution to solve that problem. And then you're not really selling because your solution, you know, you're a problem solver essentially.
So interesting, man. The more people I talk to who are really good at sales, it seems like there's such a soft social aspect to it where they're not like this blunt over like, hey, buy my thing. It's like this really friendly, connected, fun and authentic way of selling stuff.
100%. Who's going to buy something from someone that I like? Like it just doesn't make sense. I hate nothing. Like for me, nothing's worse than sitting down and getting the worst service ever. I'll never come back. Like, so I think customer service is important, going above and beyond for your prospects, for your customers, delivering, you know, like if you say you're going to do something, do it at all costs. I don't care if the world's collapsing, you get it done, you know, and that's the mentality that you need to have. So, and then be a problem solver, you know, it's like solve my problems for me. And if I don't see that I've got a problem, show me that I've got a problem and give me a solution for that. That would essentially not cost me anything because I see the value of having that more so than the cost it's going to be, right? And understand your prospect. So like as an example, before I used to walk into a boardroom with a Bupa or a Medibank, which is an enterprise deal with thousands of employees, billion-dollar businesses, right? I used to read their public reports inside out and literally not sleep until I understood their business as much as they did.
Yeah, wow.
And so once you dictate or understand and extract all those problems or issues that they're facing, because it's clearly indicated, if you get to the bottom line and understand what they are, and give them a solution that solves those problems, happy days. You've got a deal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about how we can be a bit more tactful with sales. So I know it's this whole social selling aspect to building relationships.
Yeah.
But if you've got a product that you want to go out there, how do you begin to start those conversations? How do you get into those boardrooms? How do you find those people? I suppose what I'm asking is, how should we be thinking about selling?
Yeah, I think put yourself in the position of your customer or your ideal customer. So as an example, you're selling a retail or FMCG product, fast consumer good product.
Yep.
That you're selling to a consumer, right? Online predominantly. How do we understand the customer at scale, right? So getting as much data points as possible to understand what they don't like, what they like, and then ultimately, again, fixing what they don't like and bringing in what they want to see. So the way I like to look at business and selling and, looking at your customer is almost getting a product built for your customer by your customer, right? So how can we minimize our spend and time on building something that we don't know necessarily is going to stick? So how can we build something with a customer by the customer? And so I might go to you, James. Well, at the moment, what are your biggest pain points running a podcast studio, right? And you might say, well, the lighting's an issue. This is an issue, blah, blah, blah. I'll say, what's the issue about the lighting? What are you experiencing? And you might say it's not bright enough. It's might not, and I dissect what you're currently using and go, well, if I fix that problem for you, would you use the product, right? And if it didn't cost you an extra, let me make you a prototype and you tell me what you think. And I'd go and I'd make the prototype and it might cost me $5 to make the prototype out of China or wherever, right? Because we want to do it in the cheapest, leanest way possible. And I'd give you the product and you go, Michael, well, actually I like this, but I don't like this. So let's refine and test and continue to refine until we hit the sweet spot and product market fit. Once we've done that, then we're ready to scale and put some money behind marketing and so forth and so on. That's on a consumer front. On a B2B side, it's all quite different in the sense that, again, you're selling to an enterprise or a company and so forth and so on. So fundamentally, it's somewhat similar around understanding the problems and pain points, but you want them to give you the answers for what they're looking for. So with baresop as an example, we took the product out of an accelerator called Monash. We gave 200 of the product to 200 people. They tested it out. They said, we don't like this, we like this. We refined it. Then they go, we love this. We hit the product market fit. Then we put some marketing behind it, noticed that people buy for those reasons, understood what they didn't like. So we added what they like, didn't sort of what they liked, what not they didn't like. And then on the B2B element is, again, the same thing, understanding what they want to see. But again, having those relationships or like when you talk about how do you get into doors, right? Okay. So if you've got a network, that always helps, right? If you don't, you need to be able to be persistent and give someone what they want to see. So a lot of the time when you're reaching out to a potential prospect, don't ask them about like what you're trying to sell, right? Just try and build a conversation. I've noticed you've done this, this, and this. I actually noticed a little gap here. I'd love to give you this just to try it. If you like it, great. You don't like it, no problem. We move on. But, ultimately trying again, it all comes down to what's your pain point? I recognize it. Did you recognize it? Did you not? Well, here's a pain point. Do you agree? Yep. Right. You don't agree. Let's move on. So love just being a problem solver, building those relationships.
I love that. So what I'm sort of thinking through is we're launching this new level of service with our podcast studio. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm basically talking to everybody in my network. I'm basically just sharing, hey, haven't spoken to you in a while. We've got this new thing. Thought you might be interested. We'd like to have a chat. Then I'm going through all my LinkedIn connections and I'm reaching out to everybody I know and saying, hey, we've got this new thing. Would you be interested? Blah, blah, blah. And then it seems like the next step in that process is then once you got it, you invest in marketing and that can take you to another level. Is that kind of how you would approach it, or?
Yeah, so obviously reaching out to your network and saying, I've got this thing is great, right? But that still comes across as someone who's in sales, right? So I might say to you, James, I might reach out to you, James, saying, oh, I've noticed you put up this podcast, right? I actually think, to be honest, like I loved everything you did, blah, blah, blah. But I did notice a little thing that I think could do improvement that I've tested before, right? This is it. You know, I've got a 10-page PDF I wrote on it for you specifically.
Wow.
Take your time, read it if you like it. If you don't like it, great, no problem. But, you know, would you like to take a read? Those are the key elements that I saw you doing wrong. And they'll be like, oh, okay, hold on a minute. I didn't realize, yeah? So it's like even before trying to sell them or say I'm doing this new thing, it's like, hey, I actually recognize that you did this really well. Always start on a positive. However, I thought this could potentially, you know, help you. I don't know. What do you think? Here's the thing, you know, here are the key points. Here are the suggestions, you know, or, hey, I've noticed you spoke about trying to get into retail stores in the sports industry. And one of my key contacts is actually a CEO of, you know, Nike Australia. Do you mind if I do an introduction? Obviously, they're not going to say no. All of a sudden, they're like, they love you because you've just potentially generated them $20 million in sales through the sales cycle. And they're like, actually, Michael, I want to give you all my business. Like, what else can you do with me? You know?
Man, so interesting. So it almost sounds like you're just focused on how can I build a genuine relationship?
And how can you give value? Like, before you try and retract the value from people, how can you give value to them before? Like, if you focus on that, guaranteed you'll succeed.
I love that, man. I love that. Before we wrap up, I did want to talk a little bit about investment.
Sure.
So I actually know some people who I'm friends with, and they're going through that whole cycle. They've spent years building a product. They've got it ready. And they're just sort of scratching their heads, being like, how do we make money from this thing? We built the software, ready to go. What are your thoughts? How do people approach this whole investment puzzle?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because sourcing investment is not an easy job, especially if you don't necessarily have a network or haven't got track record or some wins on the board where people are like, oh, well, you're Elon Musk, so we'll back you because you've got an unbelievable mindset and, you know. So I think number one is like, how can we build traction as cheapest, leanest way possible and get people interested in our product to demonstrate that there is interest in the product before anything, before we try to get money, before any of that.
Wow. Yeah.
Once we've done that, that's without a track record. If you've got a track record, you might say, hey, James, I'm building this sports tech business. As you know, I've built something very similar in this space. You know,
I can obviously do it. Like, here's my track record.
Yeah, like I'm bringing the best of the best here, no problem. A bit easier, right? Still not guaranteed, but easier. If you don't have that, it's like, how can I build traction? Get a product really good to a point where you would use it, right? Understanding who you're pitching to in terms of the investor, right? So let's say you invest in health tech products and I've got a, you know, a consumer good product, like probably no alignment there, right? But if I had a health tech product, then you're probably the right fit. So understanding who the audience is and who the investor is, because there's plenty of investors out there that are looking to invest money, building traction and then going, okay, well, this is the problem I recognize and that's why I've recognized it. So there's a way to sort of build pitch decks and things like that. This is the solution and why we're solving it in this way. This is the traction we've been able to build and this is the movement in terms of speed that we've been able to move. Would you have a chat, right? And pitch it that way. And so I think what investors are looking for, number one, when you're early on in your journey is, have you got what it takes to be a good founder? So those acumens, those skill sets, those attributes to put you in that founder mindset. Have you got track record? And if you don't, that's okay. But have you been able to move at a speed fast enough to make a lot of progress? So as an example, let's say you build a product in a month and a half that should usually take 12 months and you show that to an investor, they'll be like, wow, you know? So imagine if what I've done in a month and a half, what can I do in the next 12 months, right? So demonstrating how much progress you can make in a very short period of time, building as much traction as possible as early as possible. And then again, building relationships with investors during the long term, right? So let's say I'm raising money in 2 years, like why not start building relationship with investors now?
Dude.
Without any relevance to a business or an idea that I've got. Let's just build a relationship.
Yeah.
So when the time is right, they've already got a relationship and they want to back me because they like me before even any product I have.
Wow.
Right? They want to take a punt on me as a person and the founding team and so forth and so on. And so I think just building that is very important.
Man, that's incredible advice. Thank you for sharing that. One last question I had is just, what do you think are the key things people need to be successful in business? Is it the perseverance?
Yeah.
Is it intelligence? Like, is it network? What do people need to really be successful at business?
Yeah, I think number one is mindset, like just having the right mindset that we spoke to before. Number two is building a knowledge base around a specific area you're interested in, passionate in, or know that you'll never give up because you just love the space. Number two is once you build the knowledge is like the skill set. So go out, gain the skill set. And I would surround myself with like as early on as possible with people who have walked the path I want to walk and learn from them every single day. And I'd be like, I'm working for you for free. I'm shadowing you for the next 2 years. Let's go. Right. And just focusing on that. Number three is then being able to build a strong network because you'll have the knowledge, you'll have the skill set, the mindset, and you have some value to give to people to then start building a network and collaborate with people who are on the same wavelength as you. And then fourth is building those resources. So, okay, once you've been able to get the skills, the knowledge, the skills, the network, then the resource are next. It's like, how do I monetize this? How do I give to receive? How do I, be able to create something that people want, need based on problems, that they really face. And I always go back to the thing of if you fall in love with a problem, you're a lot less likely to give up than just hoping that you're in the right thing, right? So like really give thought to what problem you're solving and why.
Yeah.
Like all the very successful companies you look at, the problems that arise is from problems they faced in their own businesses or companies that they worked in. That they solved a problem or pain point that was so simple that they were able to put in there. So yeah, I think hopefully that was valuable.
Extremely valuable. Yeah. And thank you so much for being on. Really, really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
All good, mate.
Thanks.